Greetings viewers, Art the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1 on this here channel, because I wear the hat. Here on ETCG1 we talk about stuff, we don't do repair videos, so if you're looking for repair videos, link in the description to the Art the Car Guy channel. Go there, watch all the repair videos you like. However, if you wish to stick around, join in the conversation, welcome to the conversation. And for today's conversation, the art of diagnosis. This is something I think we all struggle with a little bit. I know I do. I know I have. And it's kind of something, I call it an art because that's kind of the way it feels after a while. You spend a lot of time and effort learning stuff, gathering information. In fact, the 2005 RL behind me, the door's open. I have the Encore pulling codes on it. So, given the time I have, I thought I'd shoot a video. So I'm in the process of doing a diagnosis on this RL. It has a ABS VSA light, and I believe I already know what the problem is based on some of the observations that I've made, and this is what I'm getting to. First, it starts with diagnosis. First, it starts with being taught how to diagnose things. You go to school, you maybe work in a shop, and you work under somebody as an apprentice. However you get there, somebody's going to show you how to go about diagnosing something. Maybe you read a book, maybe you watch my videos. There's all kinds of resources available to you to walk you through that process. Now, I've got a forum, as many of you know, and a lot of people come to us and ask us basically what's wrong with my car, and it's just cut to the chase. I don't want to go and pay for diagnosis or anything like that. I'm just going to post my question here, and my question is, my car broke. What's wrong? And it's not always that simple. Well, it's never really that simple. Because there's a process, there's a diagnostic process. And that diagnostic process is based off of the scientific method. And the scientific method basically states you gather observations and you draw conclusions based on those observations. Many times in diagnosis, what seems to happen is we've already drawn a conclusion and we sometimes try to back that conclusion up with evidence that we either make up or observe or, well, I don't want to say observe because it's not so much an observation as it is, well, this is what I think it is, so I'm pretty much going to make that my conclusion. And I'm going to start replacing part X. And so often, and it can be frustrating, and I understand where it comes from, but it can be frustrating to me sometimes when people say, well, I've replaced this part, and this part, and I still have a problem. I had a check engine light, it had this code, it was for an O2 sensor, I replaced the O2 sensor, it still doesn't work. Well, what was the code? P0171 or P0170 or something like that. Well, that actually means that the O2 sensor is working and it detects a lean condition. It doesn't mean the O2 sensor is bad. The other O2 sensor you just put in is still thinking there's a lean condition. That's what you should look for. And O2 sensor codes are at the top of my list as some of these things because I hear it a lot. Therein lies the issue, at least, that I'm trying to address here in this video, and that diagnosis is an art, and it does involve the scientific process. In other words, you gather evidence. You start by pulling the codes, which is what I'm doing here. In the instance of, say, if there's some sort of light on a dash, VSA, TCS, ABS, check engine, any number of things these days. That's what it starts with. It starts with you pulling a code and saying, here's the affected system. The tendency, what you would love to happen is, okay, there's the code. I go in, I replace that part, and everything's good. And here's the thing. I'm seeing more and more manufacturers, more and more people trying to go towards that model, trying to go to that place where they make a code for virtually everything. And as soon as X code comes up, you replace part Y. And I think manufacturers want to do that because I think they know that this is prevalent out in the industry, because there's a lot of us out in the industry with varying levels of expertise and experience. And that creates kind of a mixed bag for when an engineer has to sit down and figure out, okay, I built a system, now I've built a diagnostic system around that system, so when fault X happens, there is solution Y. Or, as I said, any number of things. There has to be a connection based on the fault and the affected system. And they have to engineer that, and then they engineer the troubleshooting chart based on that. And a lot of people that I know that are really good at diagnosis, that do it a lot, say for instance Paul Danner, Scanner Danner, they don't like those troubleshooting trees. They're written by engineers, and engineers write things based on numbers. not based on real world experience necessarily, because they're designing the things. They're not necessarily fixing the things. Not that they couldn't fix the things, it's a different discipline. It involves a different set of tools, a different skill set to create something than it does to fix something. And I think those people in diagnostics sort of maybe have a little bit of animosity towards engineers, in a sense, to where an engineer goes about it with a certain approach, and somebody who's in diagnosis goes about it with a completely different approach. And somewhere in the middle, hopefully the customer goes away with a fixed, repaired vehicle. But that's something we deal with. That's something we deal with as technicians. We deal with the other side of engineering. I often call it reverse engineering, in a sense, that you have to go through in order to diagnose something. But you first need to have an understanding of the system. So I'm not saying you have to be an engineer, but you have to sort of think like an engineer. Okay, how did they put it together? Or if you understand electronics and how they work and how they communicate in what I always say, the language of voltage. And you need to understand that language, just like you're listening to me now and I'm speaking in English, and you understand that English language, and you take those words, you put them together in your mind and then interpret them as thoughts. Well, the computers and systems do a similar thing, in that they send out digital signals, ones and zeros in its simplest form, and they interpret those ones and zeros as inputs and then therefore create outputs based on those inputs. Understanding that language and how those things come together mean that you can walk into a system or a vehicle or something that you have maybe never previously seen before and come up with a viable theory as to what the issue is. For instance, this vehicle here. As I said, I feel I know what's already going on with it before I ever plugged in the scan tool just to see what the codes were. I mean, that's this part of the process. The complaint is the VSA TCS light is on, traction control system. And VSA is Vehicle Stability Assist on this vehicle. Those lights are on in the dash. Well, I took it out for a test drive when it first came in, just to see how it was. I haven't seen this car in a very, very long time. And I just wanted to assess its just overall condition, just to see if there was something that could be simple. And it's just my diagnostic process. And through the course of driving it, I stopped, I shut it off. I actually drove it up to the store to get something and came back down. And when I went to leave the store, I went to move the gear lever, it wouldn't move. And I'm thinking, aha, that's a clue. It's like Blue's Clues, a clue, a clue. And that's the way it felt. It was like, ooh, okay. So I popped a little shift lock, interlock release thing off and put my screwdriver in there and was able to pull the thing out of park. I was like, you aren't gonna stop me from going somewhere, mister. And I already thought I knew what was wrong with it. So I had my wife with me and I said, you know what, just go back there and see if the brake lights are working when I step on the brake pedal. Step on the brake pedal, are the brake lights working? Nope. To me, it's almost a foregone conclusion. One, my past experience has taught me that if the shifter doesn't move, check the brake lights. And if the brake lights aren't working, it's a high probability the brake light switch is not functioning. The way this car is set up, it gets a signal from the brake light switch. The vehicle stability assist system, the traction control system take inputs from the brake lights because they need to know when you're stepping on the brakes. That's part of their strategy. So the Encore, as I'm speaking, is pulling the codes, and I believe it's going to tell me something to the effect, missing signal from brake light switch. And that's what I'm hoping to see. Now, I've sort of gone about this whole thing backwards, but I used empirical evidence. I used a diagnostic process. And that diagnostic process is based on my past experiences. I think the people that are good at diagnosis have a lot of experience with it. And when you first start out, it's hard because there's so much information that they throw at you. There's so much in your head. And it's hard to put it all together. It's hard to sort it all out, sift through, find out what's important, what's not. It's like mining for gold, you're sifting through all the gravel down to the heavy bits at the bottom. And eventually, that's what you come up with, whatever's left in the pan. And hopefully, that is a valid diagnosis. The tendency seems to be is to make the conclusion ahead of time. You got a code, MAF sensor. Well, my MAF sensor's bad, I'm gonna throw that out the door. Not bothering to check for any holes in the tube that goes from the MAF sensor to the engine, which could just as easily mean the same thing. But the computer doesn't know that because it's getting a weird voltage signal from that MAF sensor. And it says, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm going to set a code. And maybe I'm going to blank out all the other systems, go into limp in, and just take it easy until somebody fixes me. I know that many of you have your own thought process. And many of you that are new to diagnosis are developing a thought process when it comes to diagnosis. And that's what I'm advocating here, is I'm saying take your time and examine the evidence and try to avoid the major pitfall that I've run into myself, which is drawing a conclusion before we have evidence. I'm gathering evidence to support my conclusion, because I don't know that that light is on due to a brake light switch. But I know the brake light switch is bad, and I haven't even tested it. Why? It's past experience. These Hondas of this vintage had problems with brake light switches. They switched to these stupid little plastic things that honestly were junk in my opinion. And it's a major component. It's pretty important to have brake lights. The biggest takeaway I want you to take away from this, at least from me and my point of view, is don't take the evidence and make it support your conclusion. Look at the evidence and use the evidence to draw a conclusion. That's the mistake I see most people make. And they're already replacing parts, and they're already making assumptions about what is going to be the solution or what the problem is before they ever gather any evidence. Me, the evidence that I gathered was based on not being able to pull that shifter out of park. No brake lights, lights on the dash. All those things, I believe, were connected. So what are your thoughts on diagnosis and the art of diagnosis? I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, because, we're cool like that. And to continue the conversation, you can head over to ericthecarguy.com. There'll be a link in the description for a discussion about this video. You can also comment. And, hey, why not hit the like button while you're there? Or even subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe to Eric the Car Guy also. Just, go crazy with it. But if you have automotive questions, such as how to diagnose something, I would ask that you head over to ericthecarguy.com. There's a welcome video to tell you about all the wonderful features we have there to assist you with said diagnosis or whatever automotive issue you may have. In addition to that, if you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter, and I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.